Okay, equipment-wise, I guess starting with the monitors, I use the Focals, the CMS 65s. Yeah, I think Focal just make some of the best monitor speakers in the world, as far as I'm concerned. They've just got an unbelievable dynamic and a fascinating range as well, because they use the beryllium tweeters. They can reach levels of 40,000 hertz, which obviously we can't hear, but it means that if the speaker can reproduce tones that high, then it's going to have no issue producing up to 20,000 hertz. Then I have my Samsung, which I use for frequency analysis. It's actually got room testing capabilities and things, and you can plug in an instrument microphone and test the room dynamics and the resonances of your room. Never done that, never needed to. But it's great just to have a visual there, because sometimes you might find that a bass line is protruding too much or not enough, or you might not notice that, but this will tell you that basically. And you can see, particularly when I'm doing my mix downs, if there's too much below 50 hertz, then I know it's going to need a good scoop basically. And same again above sort of 15K, there's not much point going over there. And that's, you know, that's sapping up energy that the speakers could be used elsewhere basically. Then I've got my trusty Moog Little Fatty. Name says it all really. It's little, it's fat. It's just a stunning bit of kit. The signal is 100% analog flow, so you're obviously getting your genuine analog sounds, but it's got the digital controllers built in as well. And it's quite handy visually being able to see, using the LEDs where things are set. Which comes in handy for a lot of things, and it's got the classic Moog ladder filter, which just gives it that stunning sort of sound. Obviously the iMac, I've got the Mackie Big Knob, which is just essentially a volume button. Also comes in handy, I think this mono button is one of the handiest things I've ever had, because from a mastering perspective, you want your track to sound almost as good in mono as it is in stereo, and sometimes if there are phase issues with something, if maybe the left and the right may be interfering with each other in phase, you flick it onto mono and you'll pick up on that. Basically it just doesn't sound right. Then I've got my machine, which I tend to use more for live stuff, although it's a great studio toy as well, just for sort of playing around with different sounds, and it comes with a great library. I've got the iPad, probably the same as the machine, I guess. I have used it a couple of times in the studio. I've used Annie Moog and stuff, but it's probably more of a toy than a tool, if I'm honest. The Novation I bought, I don't know how long, I was probably about 21 or something when it came out, and I bought it straight away, just because there was one sound in the presets that I'd heard James Zabila use, and I just loved that. It was essentially a sawtooth, but it was just really digital and really gritty and really weak, but it just had, there was something about it, so I had to buy it. Then I've got my Roland JV1080, which is, if you're as old as me, you'll know it's a classic synth. It's just a stunning bit of kit. It's, you know, it's faithless insomnia. What more can I say? You know, it's just got some real sort of retro 90s sounds, but it's still really relevant today, especially with like the vintage expansion pack and stuff. You know, and there's classic sort of house stabs and things like that. And it's particularly good. There's the orchestra expansion pack as well, which has got some really good sort of pads, and they're really thick, rich pads. And then above that is the Proteus 1000, similar, I guess, to the Roland, but just different. I I don't know. The actual sounds are pretty much the same in that they're both sample-based digital synths, but they just give that sort of classic big pad sound, basically, and just good fun to play with. Then I've got some little bits of kit that I experiment. This is more my sort of experimentation desk. I've got Zoom 505. I've done a few things with this before, like sticking microphones through it and anything except a guitar. I think this is probably the only Zoom 505 that's never had a guitar plugged in. And then I've got a couple of mixer, which is just essentially a patch bay. I've got the EFX unit, which is pretty much bust up and overused now. But yeah, I've ripped bits of it out. Then I've got a MIDI controller as well, just another toy. I use this for all my live stuff, hence the felt pen everywhere. And yeah, it's a handy little tool. I've got a homemade valve kit, which I made. Just bought the PCBs off the internet and then put it together. And what I tend to do is when I'm doing any sort of mix downs and mastering, I tend to feed a signal out of the sound card into the valves, and then from the valves back into the sound card, which does two jobs. First of all, you get your valve sound and it gets the analog sound through. But at the same time, if you're doing it at the point of bouncing down, you're kind of avoiding any anti-aliasing, because what you're really doing is recording in real time. So it just means that any sort of sample rates that may have been oversampled or clipped or anything in your bounce down, you don't need any anti-aliasing, because you're actually feeding it out into an analog stage, bringing it back in and recording it, and that is your final bounce then. And microphone, toolbox, more boxes, spare hard drives, just general boys' toys,